Ba-da-da-da-da. It's the one and only H-O-double-P.
I thought you were going to do Inspector Gadget. Man, no. Everything reminds me of something.
Ba-da-da-da-da.
Dun, Inspector Gadget. Hooper.
Hooper. And you know it's episode 103. Hoop, hoop.
Hoop, hoop.
Hello, everybody. Ooh, that carrot was covered in salt. Goodness, I need to mix that thing better. It's episode 103 of the HooperCast. I'm Connor. That's Dustin, and we are live, thankfully.
Yay!
Nothing happened, but it's just a nice day when you wake up and your heart's still beating.
Correct.
So let's never forget that.
Yay! This has been inspiration. With the HooperCast.
This has been, yeah. Dustin, do you have anything tasty for lunch today?
I made a sub sandwich. I found a hoagie roll here.
Oh.
And so I made a sub sandwich, but I didn't have any meats beyond pepperoni, so I made a pizza sandwich.
It's not like that that hot dog bun above the fridge in college, right?
It was not.
Okay, it was packaged and not
Gross.
Expired.
Correct.
The correct color.
It was still well within its date range, and it was delicious. Although I think the issue was the hoagie was so thick that the pizza-ness wasn't enough. So I should have had like 2 or 3 layers of pizza.
Oh.
It's like the ratio, the bread to pizza ratio was off.
Well, breakfast. Oh God.
Breakfast.
Breakfast.
What's a breakfast?
It's breakfast practice. So,
yes.
Practice. What do I call it? Breakfast makes perfect.
Breakfast makes perfect.
Breakfast makes a perfect breakfast.
Correct. No, I
Patrick.
mean, it was good, though. I mean, it's a sandwich, but I probably should have put another layer of pepperonis at least.
Oh,
there.
Well, the next time will be great.
It will be.
I got
I had some sun chips.
Oh. Those are good.
Sun chips are awesome.
I got I make this salad every day, and so I usually eat this before we record, but I'll be munching away whenever I can. It's like 50-50 spring mix kind of stuff, and they got like carrots and cheese and like a guacamole cup and like white beans.
No.
Yeah, it's super super sweet.
That sounds good.
Not sweet in flavor, but
right,
sweet
just
like
sweet
awesome.
And awesomeness.
Yeah. Dustin, you were telling me before we heated up the mics that you had both caught up on The Walking Dead minus this past week's episode, which is called something, I don't know. You and I are in the same place. We've each watched the Solo Morgan episode.
Yes.
And that's as far as we are.
Yes.
Okay, so, and you've also listened to 101, where I was...
You were alone.
I was alone, and I was speaking from a frustrated place about the show, and I'm curious to know your reaction just both to the episode and to what the show's doing right now. And again, I just want a quick disclaimer. I know that we talk about... I keep saying we're not a Walking Dead podcast, but we talk about The Walking Dead a lot. But it's pretty much because I'm pretty close to quitting watching the show. That's probably why.
Yeah, I'm always on that like fence. I've been here a lot, and so while we're not going to devote the podcast to recapping, like you said in 101, but I mean when things bother us, they bother us, and the HooperCast is a great way to kind of vent and be a critic. So yeah, so we're going to be critical because that's what we do.
Well, how do you feel?
I'm about on par with you in terms of, just frustration, at least, unless your frustration has changed since 101. But yeah, I'm just frustrated with it because I don't know what it's doing anymore. And I don't think it knows what it's doing anymore. And, I mean, I'm not fooled for a second. Like, Glenn's not dead.
Right.
Spoiler alert. Glenn's not dead. I I'm not fooled for a half second. And everything you said about his relationship with Nicholas, that's his name, right? Nicholas?
Yeah, Nicholas.
Yeah, everything that you said about that, like, is absolutely 100% what I thought too, which was like, okay, we're going to redeem this character, and over time he'll prove himself as a valuable member of the group.
Unless he kills himself.
Right, which will come out of nowhere, and it's just sort of a last-minute ploy by the writers to force, like, spoon-feed some drama into the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean...
Especially if you're that actor. It's like, can you imagine that guy, that would be his big break, was the asshole in The Walking Dead who turned out to be, like, your favorite character?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I've never read the comics, but I know some of the big points. So Nicholas was a name that I don't remember hearing. So they could have done anything with him. And you know, for me, I thought that was exciting that we could see something kind of cool blossom out of it. And, you know, something that I've said for a while is that I wish there was a little more, like, optimism or a little more hope from The Walking Dead. And that could have been a perfect way to show that, is like, here's a guy who can be, you know, redeemed from, you know, being, you know, the most hated character in the world. And here's him, you know, becoming valuable and proving his worth to Rick and the crew. And I think that would have been cool. So it's really a lost opportunity by the writers. And like you said, if that's what Scott Gimple, you know, he never saw him as a coward and he never, you know, saw what we saw in it, then that's a failure on the writers' part anyway, because they're not writing correctly to fit what's in their head. Does that make sense? Like, they're giving the audience clues of things that they don't mean to be giving the audience clues about, and so therefore it's a failure. Yeah,
you've given the audience a completely different impression of the character than what was in your
intended.
Head. I never saw him as a coward, and I always saw that as like some weird PC way of him trying not to like judge the character. Which
maybe.
one,
he's stupid.
He's fictional,
right?
Two, you can judge actions, and what he did to Glenn is pretty cowardly and dishonorable. So it's completely okay to say Nicholas is a bastard. I don't like him, and he's just bad news.
And just look back on, like, Bryan Cranston throughout Breaking Bad's run is always saying, like, I love playing Walt, but he's a jerk. Like,
Walt's a terrible person. Yeah.
Yeah. But he was, you know, honest in that, but I have a lot of fun playing him. And that's sort of also, you know, to take this back to what we talked about recently too, you know, Daniel Craig saying what he says about James Bond is ridiculous. It's like, why can you not enjoy playing a character who disagrees with your points of view? That doesn't make any sense to me. It seems that that's the point of performance anyway, is to adopt another person's point of view and bring it to life in not only a convincing but a sympathetic manner.
See it from all sides.
Right. And so anyway, you know, I hate that, but that's an aside.
Yeah.
I think that you know, the writers missed an opportunity with Nicholas, and all I see this as, this whole thing with Glenn, is a ridiculous, like, marketing, like, let's get some buzz kind of a ploy. Mm-hmm. I don't buy for a second that was not their intention. I completely believe that their intention was, how can we get people to talk? Right. I know, let's do a cliffhanger episode in the middle of the season and not come back to it for episodes. And so, you know, the next episode picks up and you don't see anything with Glenn, and it's kind of like, all right, you know, I'll buy it, fine. And then the next episode is the flashback with Morgan, and it's like, ugh, I mean, I want to see this kind of, but I mean, come on, you're really stretching this way longer than it ought to be. And then the episode that neither of us have seen, Hooper, that has already aired, spoiler alert, does not resolve this story either. So now this is 3 episodes without resolution to a cliffhanger. And I just think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
From a storytelling perspective, because the only reason you would do that is to get people talking and to make them
make them squirm, but not even
pretty much.
Not even in a dramatic way, almost like in a torturous way.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's there's no, like I understood like with the Morgan solo episode, and I was like, maybe that's a good way to do it. It's just like make us wait another week to sort of, because other shows would do that, like Lost would do that, where you would have Jack in peril, and the next episode had nothing to do with where he was. It was someone else's story, someone back at camp. There was something else going on, and then the episode after that would sort of tie those things both together.
But the problem with this always is pacing.
Yeah.
Because if you jump to an aside, that would be like, okay, we're telling this story. Here's like the Order of the Phoenix, and everything's great and going fine. And then all of a sudden, oh yeah, here's a chapter wholly devoted to like, I don't know, like Neville. And it's like, well, this doesn't pertain to anything. It's just him like going through like and learning botany. And you're like, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's good information, but it wasn't necessary to tell me this right now.
Yeah, I liked the Morgan episode.
I did too.
But the only problem I had with it, which kind of ties into what you're saying, is maybe it would have been better to have something happening at the camp. That you go into the episode, you're like, what happened with Glenn? Let's get some closure. And they don't give you that, but what they give you is an equally tense, if not more tense, happening at the camp, so that you're not thinking too much about what's going on with Glenn because you're too worried about what's going on with these people. Exactly. Like, you knew Morgan wasn't going to die or anything in his flashback.
Right.
Because it's a flashback. It was still a very artfully done episode that I really enjoyed. But the only problem with it was, okay, so the outcome, the outcome. He comes out of this encounter with John Carroll Lynch, and this is how he learns to like not be a psychopath and use a stick.
Exactly.
And so the outcome of the episode, and the whole time you're like, what's going on with Glenn?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And also, like, just off of that, dovetailing off of that point, if what was happening at the camp had some bearing on, like, almost like a segue to the flashback, it would have made more sense, because as it is, it's just, here's an episode where Morgan's like, let me tell you about what happened a few years ago. And then at the end of the episode, it's revealed he's talking to somebody that it doesn't even make sense story-wise why he would be talking to this person. And I guess it'll come back, to it later. I don't know, because he locks him up or whatever. But I'm just like, to me, it would just make more sense. And I know maybe it's a little hokey to do sort of a Lost thing where something at the camp is reminding him of, something that happened years ago, and then we flash back, or, whatever. But just so that there's a segue, and it's not just like, here's another episode, and it's just something random. So I don't know. I think there's just a better way to do that. And plus, I think, again, in this day and age where, and especially a show that has a show devoted to talking about the show,
right?
You can't do stuff like this, because the number one question you're going to get is he dead? And you have to either lie or avoid the truth, because, or tell the truth, I guess, is always an option. That'd be a fine option. But what they should be saying is, we prefer not to answer that question, and we would prefer if you would keep watching. That way you can, see it as it unfolds. And that would be a satisfying answer, but instead, by sort of skirting the question, it's almost like manipulating us to keep watching. And I don't know. I just see the whole thing as audience manipulation, and that aggravates me a lot, because I think there's a lot of... I think that writers go to audience manipulation when they're not telling a story that you're already connected to, and that's the problem. So anyway, I'm just really frustrated with The Walking Dead, because I don't see them doing anything different, anything new, or anything unique. There's a ton of characters now that I do not care about. There's that one where the doctor is like, trying to save the person, and while I was watching it, I was thinking, okay, you know what I'm talking about? It was a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
The doctor's trying to save it when the wolves are there, and I'm like, okay, let's get this straight. This scene is about two characters that we don't care about, Eugene and Tara, dealing with a character we don't know who's trying to save a character we don't know. Why am I watching this scene? Where is the tension? The person on the operating table, I don't care if they live or die. They don't even have a name. It's a red shirt. The person doing the saving, I also don't care about because I just met her 5 minutes ago. And the two people that are like giving her encouragement to save the person's life, I don't care about because one of them's a coward and a liar and the other one is just uninteresting.
Yeah.
So why? Why am I watching this scene? And it just seems to me like they need to clean house, and I thought that's what the Wolves were going to do, and just sort of leave it, cut it all back down to the bare minimum and show us the characters that we care about. And Glenn is one of those characters, and to do what they're doing with him and instead focus on characters we don't care about is really frustrating.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Whatever.
No, I agree. It's kind of aimless. There's not much more for me to say. I mean, I'm at least going to carry on until the winter hiatus, which is what, a few more weeks?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
3 or 4 more weeks. Okay. But really how they handle that cliffhanger there is going to really determine whether I stick around for the spring.
Right, and I assume we'll know something about Glenn by then.
Right. Well, yeah. Wouldn't that be stupid if we didn't? We still haven't heard from Glenn. It's been like 2 months.
Right. Exactly. Ugh.
I mean, I've already. This is kind of a subject change, but sort of a tie-in. I've already. So you know how a few weeks ago I decided I stopped watching Last Week Tonight.
Yeah.
I've been overall happier since I did that.
Yeah.
I suspect the same. I've quit another show that I was keeping up with.
What was that?
This one may surprise you.
Tell me.
Let's see. You don't know the shows I'm watching. I was going to make you guess, but you don't know. You don't know my life.
You don't know about me?
I decided to stop watching Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh.
It's just...
What led to that?
Nothing. I was actually in the middle of an episode.
Really?
I didn't even want to finish the episode.
Wow.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, it's due to ABC.com's horrible, horrible video player.
All the networks have awful video players.
ABC's is shitty. So the Muppets one has completely different interface than Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. does, by the way. So when you're watching like the Muppets, which I won't stop watching because that's a good show. The Muppets,
despite its behind the scenes shakeup.
Oh, we'll get to that. Good tease, Dustin. Man, if only we had commercial breaks. That would mean we made money. So I'm watching the Muppets, and then so I full screen it because why wouldn't you? And then, if you pause it while it's full screen, the screen goes black, and then when you click the play button, the little ABC square is in the middle, and it won't go away.
What?
It just covered.
That's ridiculous.
So yeah, so there's no way to get rid of it unless you refresh the page. Now, usually when you refresh the page, it'll just come back. It's like, oh yeah. But lately, it's not been doing that. It starts at the beginning, so I have to click into wherever I was to find it. So I'm thinking like, well, why am I watching this on demand then? Because if I can't pause it essentially without getting a horrible picture, then what am I doing? And so the same thing for on the phone, the mobile version. And then with S.H.I.E.L.D., it was the same thing. And it was whoa. And then if you click into anything that's not the first block of the show, then you have to watch the commercials after you already watched commercials to start watching the show. So you've got 6 minutes of commercials just to get back to where you were because you paused because someone walked up and asked you a question. Or you had
ridiculous.
To poop. Like something. And so I'm just like, well, this is stupid. So I was already kind of pissed off with that. But I was just sort of realizing, like, I had just been explaining to someone why they shouldn't bother with the show. And a lot of it had to do with, I had explained the Ike Perlmutter thing to somebody and how, the television end of Marvel is even less connected to movies now than it probably already was. And I was just thinking about all these things. I was thinking about how Joss had no interest in the show anymore and how, I mean, granted, there haven't been any Marvel movies out, since I've really been watching the show this fall, except for Ant-Man, but there's no mention of the Pym particle or any of that. They may have mentioned it like in once and whatever. But I was just thinking about it, and I was like, while I was glad that the show was growing into something more of like people with abilities, not just like, basically an NCIS with S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. I just sort of, for some reason, I thought the show's probably better since it started. But I was just thinking about I just don't care. Like, I really sat down and finally was just like, I'm keeping up with this, but why? Like, I'm in the third season of this show, and and every time I watch it, I'm thinking, it's not really, I can't explain it. It's not that I really don't care about the characters or anything, but I'm really thinking about it, and I'm like, this show's a lot of different things. Like, there's some, it's not even poorly executed. It's just, what is it? And I think it's just that, why is this a Marvel show, I guess? Yeah. Because they're doing some cool stuff where this weird monolith swallowed up one of the characters at the end of the last season. You're like, whoa, that's a cliffhanger. And then she's on another planet for like 2 years or something. But then like no time is passing on the other end, and so they finally help her escape or whatever, or whatnot. And then she's trying to get back to it, and so there's a little bit of like Stargate-y kind of stuff there, you know. But then I'm sitting there, after a while, you sit there and think, this is within the Marvel universe, but the only thing they're doing right now is I just feel like they're just setting up the Inhumans. They're just going around because something's going around killing Inhumans, so they're trying to find Inhumans, but also save Inhumans from this other thing. And I don't care. Yeah. So I decided to stop watching that show, and maybe if I hear that, if it starts winning Emmys or whatever in its 5th season, then I'll come back to it. But I doubt it. I've got so many shows I'm watching right now. I have a gigantic catalog of shows that I'm trying to condense. The only way to condense them is to watch them, and the only way to watch them is to sit down and watch them. And I just don't have time I'm trying to watch The Walking Dead, which again, by Thanksgiving, I might stop watching. I'm trying to watch, what else am I watching? I'm trying to finish up The League. That'll be done, but like, I'm trying to watch, the Muppets, and then I'm trying to get through Buffy, and I'm trying to watch Bob's Burgers and Archer, and I want to start a different drama. And I'm just thinking, I don't have time for these dumb shows that I don't really like. I was with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the beginning. I was a ground up with that show, so I don't feel like I wasted lots of hours streaming it, like spending time binge watching it. So that's good. But I gave it 2.5 seasons of my time. And I don't know. I get my Marvel fix from movies just fine, and I just feel like with the caliber of those movies continuing to rise, and the show not rising with it, it's not really worth my time.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, let me go ahead and throw this in there because I have to. Is that if you want your superhero fix, The Flash is definitely your thing. And so there you go. Right. I feel like you would enjoy The Flash, Hooper, but I gotta tell you, I don't think it's not necessary to watch Arrow, but you're certainly rewarded if you do. So I know that and I know that the way that you are is the way that I am, which is you like to have the full picture. And so for me to say, Hooper, you should watch The Flash is kind of also saying, Hooper, you should also watch Arrow. And, while they are on Netflix, I think that, that's a huge sentence to tell somebody, like, you need to watch all of these things. It's 5, because right now there's 3 seasons of Arrow on Netflix and 1 of The Flash. I mean, that's a lot of TV to try to catch up on. So,
yeah, I always had a plan to get to those shows because you'd recommended them so much. But it was just a matter of I've invested no time and I have other things. I have a list and they're getting in line now. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the other hand of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I tweeted out not too long ago, probably like a couple weeks ago now, that literally The Flash is doing everything that I've ever wanted a superhero show to do. And it continually blows my mind what they're able to do, not only in a network television setting, but also in a CW series. Yeah. So, anyway.
Well, so anyone who checks Twitter a day late and wanted to see me live tweet the show, sort of, that will no longer be happening because I'm done. Oh. So I'm not angry about it. I'm not bitter. I'm just like, the show's not bad, but I just don't. I'm not going to burn calories trying to keep up with it every week. It feels like a chore. You know,
Yeah.
and frankly, so is The Walking Dead, and that's where I'm sort of like. Whereas with the Muppets, I'm like, oh, I want to see, you know, you don't even have to watch the Muppets. You can wait a couple weeks and then catch up on 3 episodes of the Muppets. But I want to watch it every week because I know it'll be good.
Yeah.
That's how I know I want to stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I'm just kind of looking forward to the winter hiatus just to catch up on Netflixy stuff and not worry about what's airing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. I hear you. Well,
So-
do you want to talk very quickly about the Muppets?
Yeah,
Shakeup?
I do. I want to know what that's about.
All right, so very, very quickly, because I don't think there's a whole lot of information about it, but essentially, the co-creator and executive producer and showrunner of the Muppets has been let go or has stepped down or whatever. His name is Bob Cushel. He's no longer with the show, and replacing him, apparently, you know, she's in negotiations, is Kristen Newman. And the idea is that so the Muppets has 10 episodes going. Then the hiatus will happen, and they're going to do another 6. And the first of that 6 will be under the new showrunner, and will be sort of a soft reboot of the series. So it's because evidently it was complete like creative issues that got Bob Cushel removed from the show. It was just completely creative, and so whether that is, there's a lot of sort of up in the air right now about whether that's the style of humor, whether that's the mockumentary style of the show, whether that is the format of, you know, it being around Miss Piggy's talk show. It could be a lot of different things, but theoretically, we're going to see a bit of a different show after the hiatus, in some big and some small ways. You know, it could be as simple as, you know, like the tone or whatever, but it could be as big as Miss Piggy is not doing that same job anymore.
Huh.
I've heard a rumor that they're going to, instead of creating that talk show, they're just going to be doing the Muppet Show again, and we're just going to watch, you know, behind the scenes of creation of the Muppet Show. So it'd be something that instead of only Piggy and Fozzie being a part of the show, really, and I guess the Electric Mayhem, all of the Muppets would be on stage at some point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of, you know, rather than just saying, okay, Rizzo is a writer, we'll never see him, you know, actually perform, you know, okay, well, now he will. And so that's the rumor, is that it'll focus around something a little different. But who knows what it'll actually be. I know there was a little bit of pushback because of the more mature nature of the comedy. And I know that you and I talked about this in our review of the pilot episode, that it's sort of outgrowing and already kind of has outgrown the mockumentary style. So those are sort of the big rumors that are going around, that it could be a career change. You know, it's centered around, you know, everybody's, you know, workplace. It would be different, or the style of the comedy or the style of the show itself. So I don't know what the future will hold for that show, but evidently it's something quite different. So.
Huh. That's interesting. Well, see, because I was okay with the talk show format. Because I felt like it was a way to get, you know, to work their cameos in a believable way. It's a great device to do that. For me, though, you know, if you watch that unaired pilot, it doesn't have anything to do with a talk show. The idea in the unaired pilot is like Kermit addresses the group and says, "Hey, ABC wants a new Muppet show." And so that's what we're going to do. And so the whole show in the unaired pilot was about creating the show that they're creating. Oh. So it was like super meta. But then when the show was officially picked up and the pilot was officially produced, it was changed to the late night talk show. So anyway, the rumor is that either the rumor that seems to be coming up the most in my Googling is that they'll be producing like a Muppet show. But then again, I don't know if that means like in the original unaired pilot, they were producing the show that we're watching.
if that makes sense.
See, that seems likely.
That seems what?
It seems logical, like, for that, based on the unaired pilot being about the Muppet Show, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're getting made. Okay, well, I'm in charge, so we're going to do the talk show idea.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, that makes sense. To me, though, the issue with that is it's so incredibly meta. Like, it's like a layer in a layer in a layer. Like, we're watching a show about the making of a show that we're not really seeing except in bits and pieces of the show that we're watching. That's like so many layers that I think that's super hard and convoluted to try to explain in a sitcom, you know, to new viewers. So right. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what will happen, but nevertheless, the show will change in some way.
But it'll be, at least with that, like, because I always said, like, the idea of the Muppets being behind the scenes of a production in the real world, the real believable world where they're good and bad people and, like, you know, and show business and all that stuff, like, that idea, as long as they're producing a show, I'm fine with it. Like, you can still keep all the character dynamics, you know, of Kermit essentially being in charge, you know, although maybe not as much as, like, in a talk show format, if he's like the EP of a talk show. You know, Piggy still gets to be a diva without really getting to call the shots, and so you get to keep, and you get to still have all the essentially the writer's room kind of scenes like that exist on the show now. You still get the special guests, you still get the whole backlot feel, so you really get to keep all the good things about the show and just scrap the stuff that maybe wasn't working, or, I mean, everything they're going to change if they go that way, I'm fine with, because that doesn't knock what I like about the show. Like, if they all decided they were going to work in an office, I'd be like, oh, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
But if they're still keeping that part, then that's fine. And honestly, like, I guess by a soft reboot, they might just say in that first episode, like, you know, if it's going to be that meta, just say, oh, yeah, the talk show got canceled. So
right, no, that's true. They could do that. That's actually kind of funny now that you mention that.
They could absolutely reference the fact that the talk show got canceled, and now they're going to be doing the Muppet Show.
Sure, I mean,
know, and then just move on.
Yeah,
and you can still keep the relationship between Piggy and Kermit, like that context, or you can scrap it. But I mean, if you're going to reference, if it's going to be a soft reboot, then that tells me they're going to reference the events they've already established, but just not keep them.
Right. No, yeah. So I think my thing about the Muppet Show is I think it's funny, but I think there's room for improvement. So I'm actually optimistic about this, because I think now's a good opportunity, and probably the best opportunity they'll have, to kind of sit down and say what's working, what isn't working, let's fix what, you know, is not working and make it work. And if that means, you know, making it more akin to the traditional, like, Jim Henson, you know, Muppet variety show, then I'm all for that. I think that would be fun. So, you know, yeah, I think it'll be cool. Mm-hmm. Can I break format for a second, and before we talk about Spotlight, and just tell you this little Star Wars anecdote that I have?
Yeah, I'd like to hear this.
Okay, so this is strange. I had a dream last night that it was about Star Wars. Sometimes I have dreams where I watch movies, and I had a dream where I watched The Force Awakens, and the plot that my subconscious came up with was freaking awesome. And now I'm super, like, not into seeing the movie, because I'm like, it won't be as good as what I came up with while I was asleep. By
the way, the last time you said this is not the first dream Dustin has had about The Force Awakens.
Is it not?
Maybe 2 years ago, you said had a dream that, and you talked about it on the podcast, I believe. I could find it. You talked about how you had a dream that that you were working on the movie, and that
I have no memory of this.
And that J.J. Abrams was like, yeah, come, you know, just come follow me, you know. And you said, and it was bad. Like, the sets were terrible.
No.
The actors were walking all over JJ, like he wasn't controlling them at all. Like Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher were all just like, yeah, whatever. And JJ was going like, okay. And you said, I woke up not feeling great about how it was going to turn out.
Well, that's kind of happened again. I'm kind of like, man, what I came up with was so cool. The idea in my head was like all I remember from the movie in my head was, and again, I don't know any of the relations between any of these characters, but who's the main guy in the movie? What's his name?
Hero?
I can't remember. Yeah, the
Finn?
guy, the Finn.
Yeah,
That's the male lead,
yeah,
right?
John
Okay.
Boyega.
Boyega. Oh, that's right. Okay, so it was a scene with him, and he was frozen upside down. You remember how Luke was frozen upside down in the second film, and he was in that cave with like the snowman or whatever, and he was trying to get the. So anyway, John Boyega was upside down. And he was like that, and only this time, instead of like a snowman, it was Luke, and Luke was like hooded, and he was like. They were having this exchange, and what it was about was like Luke had not turned evil, but he had turned against the Jedi Order. And so he was like, he said, for so long, the Jedi told the Sith that they deal in absolutes, but we were doing the same thing. And we said, you're either a Jedi or you're not. And I'm nothing. He said, I'm one with the Force now. And the Force is me. And so all of a sudden, like all these Force ghosts behind him, like Yoda and like Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn, like everybody, Anakin, all of these, and going all the way back to the very first person to ever use the Force. And they sit down and talk with John Boyega, and they're like, the thing is, the Jedi were not supposed to be political. The Jedi were not supposed to be policemen. The Jedi were here to instill love and instill peace in the world, not by force, but through, love or whatever. And so anyway, Luke was like, so I am no longer Jedi, and I am not a Sith. I am just simply the Force. And anyway, basically what he was getting at was like, we're gonna instate sort of, and like Yoda was there too, and he was like mentoring him too. He's like, so we're gonna almost reinstate the Jedi Order, but we're gonna do it the right way, and we're going to allow. I don't know how to explain it. But anyway, it was all like the Jedi were wrong and the Sith were obviously wrong, but it was like Yoda, essentially like Ghost Yoda being like, wrong we were to be political and all of this stuff, and it was all like almost discounting the prequels, which is what I liked about it. Was like it said like, here's the prequels, but then it even was like, but they're stupid because look how the Jedi were. And I don't know, I just thought it was really cool, and that the idea of Luke just sort of not being anything and just being something new, and I don't know, I don't want to say like a gray area, but just something apart, and I don't know, I just thought that was cool. Anyway, whatever. It's probably not nearly as cool when I say it out loud as it was in my head and in my dream, but I was like super insanely excited about it when I saw it in my dream.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's really
I'm sure that's not what they're doing, because that kind of changes stuff and kind of paints the Jedi in a negative light. But for me to like look back and have like Yoda stand there as a ghost or whatever and be like, we were wrong in the way that we got political. We got too involved in like trying to maintain order by force. Mm-hmm. We were trying to be these intergalactic, peacekeepers, but instead of keeping peace, we actually promoted violence and we promoted disorder. And it's time that Luke, starting with Luke, who is, just nothing, this equally Jedi and Sith, I guess, or just nothing, will start something new. And I thought, in my dream too, one of the cool things was Luke was using the Force lightning as well as like the Jedi mind tricks. So he was able to use Sith powers and Jedi powers and like totally new things, because he was just one with the Force in a way that the Jedi never were, because they never embraced the darkness, and the way that the Sith were because they never embraced the light. And anyway, I don't know, in my head that was really cool. So
Huh.
Anyway, I don't know what Luke will do in the new movie, but we'll see.
Huh.
And it was also legit to see, like, on one screen, Liam Neeson, Yoda, Mark Hamill, like, Ewan McGregor. It was cool. I would say it did have Hayden Christensen in my dream, and I didn't like that part. But you know. And anyway, but yeah, like I said, also there was a little point, you know, during the whole like explanation of all this to John Boyega, where the original person to use the Force, the very first person, was like talking to them too. And anyway, I thought that was cool too. So,
well, that would be
so
cool
however
if
you
that
want to
was
label this, like, you know, fan fiction corner or
yeah. Well, that's interesting. I might just have to call it Dustin's Dreams. Dustin's dreams are better than fiction, probably. Something like that. Yeah, better than fiction. Well, let's talk about Spotlight. We're pretty deep into this episode, so
yeah.
I don't know how long you plan to speak about it, but
Not super long, I don't think.
Okay.
Although it may, you know, it may incite some conversation. I don't know.
Okay. Well, go for it.
Let me pull it up on IMDb really quick, just so I can get some names going.
Okay. Now this was you saw this at the film festival.
I did. We played this about halfway through the festival as one of our gala screenings. So Spotlight is directed and written by Tom McCarthy. It stars Mark Ruffalo, Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Liev Schreiber, John Slattery, Stanley Tucci. I could go on and on. Billy Crudup, a bunch of people, bunch of cool names, cool faces. And it's the story of a Boston Globe team called Spotlight, and they have sort of unwittingly uncovered a huge scandal of child molestation and the cover-up of child molestation within the Catholic Church there in Boston. And so it is based on a true story, and it's a really kind of hard-hitting film because, you know, I guess just the nature of what it deals with is always hard hitting, but it certainly hits hard because of almost the mystery of it. You know, it's uncovering the truth behind these things, and the way that they have to go about it, pretty much in secret. Because if anyone, you know, it finds out about it, they can shut it down, and especially in Boston, where, you know, everybody is Catholic.
Yeah, big Catholic population in Boston.
Yeah, it would be. It's a huge thing that I think a lot of people, they were afraid a lot of people would want to stop, because it certainly, you know, shows the Catholic Church in Boston in a negative light, and so a lot of pushback from friends and from family members of the Spotlight team who are working on it, and so yeah, it's a hard hitting movie, and it's really interesting to follow all of this, because this happened, I can't remember what year this happened in, but I don't remember hearing a whole lot about it. Like, I remember hearing about it, but not in depth, and it may have been because I was young. It may also be because the part of the country where I'm from does not have a large Catholic population. That maybe it just wasn't being talked about very often. So I
want to say it was like 2006 or something, but I don't know why I'm thinking of that.
I think it was while we were in high school, but I can't remember. Let me see if I can figure it out. But yeah, I don't remember hearing a whole lot about it. What do you remember hearing about the story, Hooper?
I just remember, and still hear about it all the time, about how, especially when people want to make broad, disparaging statements about the Catholic Church, they're always just like, well, they're a bunch of child molesters, which is always, generalizations are always terrible, but like when you're accusing 1 billion people of being okay with touching kids, that's kind of insulting, and you know. So I just heard a lot of references to Catholics or to the people, the powers that be in Catholicism as touching kids. Therefore, it is a discredited religion. Where, if we're going to discredit a religion for doing terrible things, okay, we can discredit Catholicism for touching kids, but let's also discredit Islam because all it takes is one terrorist blowing up a car bomb. So if all it takes is one priest touching a kid, let's take out maybe half the world's population because they're either Catholic or Muslim.
Well, by that logic, any organization of people can be completely discredited because you'll find one of them who has something that you don't agree with. Right. So
it was. I just remember hearing about it, and then people saying that there was. I could never pin down which case they were referring to because when they talked about a cover up, I didn't know they were talking about within the Vatican, and I'm like, I don't think the Vatican would cover up something like that, So I don't know if they're referring to this incident then when they're talking about a cover up. I can see how I can see how a specific area of of a city like in Boston or somewhere else where the bishop of that city may not want it to get out so that it didn't ripple to the entire religion. I don't see the Pope going, this can't get out.
Right.
I don't see him, essentially Joe Paternoing this situation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And I don't know much about the way that the Catholic Church is structured in terms of, the hierarchy of
parish priests. Parish priests, I can tell you. Parish priests essentially are under the authority of they're all under the authority of the Pope. It basically all goes to the Pope. Sure. But there's if you want to look at a rank, there's the pastor of a parish, there's the bishop, there's the archbishop, of a city, here, Thomas Rhodes, the Archbishop of Mobile. And then I think there's either a bishop of an area of the country or there's just a bunch of archbishops and higher bishops. Like the guy, Timothy Dolan in New York, he's like a bigwig in the church, but everyone ultimately is under the authority of Christ, but
sure.
but through the by proxy of the Pope.
Gotcha. The way that it's sort of explained, as I understand it in the film, it seems that there's, I guess, a bishop of an area, and I don't know if the area was just Boston or if it was just that sort of geographic location, and evidently they kept a large log every year of each person in whether it's at the priest level or above, and where they are in terms of what church they belong to, what church they're leading, and all of this. And what the Spotlight team found was that whoever was in charge, this bishop over this area, when he put this book out, there was a specific designation for priests who had been discovered involved in child molestation, and then they were not removed from
rotation, basically.
Yeah, essentially they were just moved to another church. So they were removed from that church, but they were moved to another where typically the process repeated itself. And then they were moved again and again and again because they continued this pattern of poor behavior. So I think that's the cover up they're talking about, is that somebody somewhere knew that the reason we're pulling this priest from this church is because of this, but we want him just to go over here and maybe that'll make the problem go away, but it didn't.
Maybe it's just the kid that's enticing him and not something wrong with his head.
Right. So
if we just remove him from this slutty kid.
We remove him from that child, he'll be fine.
Yeah, that's oh God.
But it just kind of kept repeating, and I think, I can't remember the number, but they found a large number of priests there in Boston that had been removed by the bishop because of these accusations. I'm not going to say the number the number like 79 comes to my head, like 79 priests who had done this in the Boston area and had been just sort of removed and moved and rotated around the area. So it was a large number of priests. And anyway, so the story is just about, finding these people, removing them, sort of outing them as what they were, removing them from their positions of leadership in the church. And, obviously the newspaper can't do that, but they can out them, publicly. And then also, if there's a way to get them to, see justice for what they've done, then, that, and then also a process of helping the victims. And they interview some of the victims during the film and show how their lives were changed because of this incident. And sometimes these people go on to live normal lives, and sometimes they don't. But in pretty much all the cases, there's a hidden shame that goes along with it, as you would expect. And in some cases, it turns people off of the Catholic Church. And
you're talking about the victims?
Yes, the victim. Yep.
Yeah. There's always a blame that the victim in most, if not all cases of I'll say most. I'm sure there's some outliers, but in most cases of any kind of sexual assault or molestation, there's a tendency to blame yourself or to internalize it. Like, well, if it's such a bad thing, then why did it happen? Like, what did I do to? It's a weird thing. Like, it's really tough for people to go like, man, shit happens.
Right, exactly.
Someone touched me. Like,
and especially when it happens that young. I mean, that's during your formative years.
Oh my, yeah, that's the word. Well, and the problem is these. I know this from all these. From I don't intensely study the subject, but I hear enough about this to where I know that one of the ripple. It's not just terrible in and of itself, but you're creating abusers when you do that. You are because these people. Like a lot of people who perpetrate a crime like this usually were victims themselves of that crime of abuse, and
they do sort of explore that a little in the film as well.
Yeah, it's a horrible cycle. That kind of thing creates. You would think that like that person would know more than anybody why that's terrible to do, but it's not. But their empathy turns off as a result of that, and they sort of just become like this shell, and then that sort of informs like their whole worldview of like what's okay or normal or what's normal. I don't know. Like they're spun off their axis, and then it's not that like you can take a perfectly good person, rape them, and then they're going to be a rapist now. But right. if you especially you grow up and that's sort of your reality, whether it's your parents or a priest, a trusted authority figure, family member, a sibling, sometimes, you can grow up with some skewed thoughts about a lot of stuff. And I'm not surprised at all about, I'll listen to old episodes of Loveline and the guy will talk about how, my brother this or my stepbrother or like the neighbor kid who would stay over or like my mom's boyfriend. Like it's nuts.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, and the film explores that a little bit. I mean, primarily this is about reporters, so it's all in terms of interviewing victims or interviewing these priests themselves. So it's. But it's a really good film. Like I said, it hits hard, and at times it's uncomfortable. And I think there's something inside of everybody when they watch this, or when you talk about the subject or whatever, that you just, it just infuriates you that anything like this ever happens, regardless of what organization it's a part of, or regardless of who's doing the molesting. It's just infuriates you. And so when I watched this film with the crowd, the gasps and like just the general like kind of feeling of it like just carried it and heightened everything. So this is a film that I feel like most people will not see with an audience because, I mean, if we're being honest, this is kind of a red box it kind of movie. Not because it's not a good movie, but just because, you know, why spend the $12 when you could just spend $1.50?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of people wanting to pack into a theater with other people for, you know.
This isn't a blockbuster, and you know, let's be honest, it's one of those that may make you uncomfortable when you watch it. So why would you pay $12 to be made uncomfortable? But I'll say this: watching it with an audience really did heighten some of the drama, and it made it, you know, a little more of a group like therapy session in a way, and I think that it has a lot here to say about the way that we deal not just with other people that we disagree with or, you know, whatever, but it also has a lot to do with the way that we see victims, the way that we deal with people who are, you know, victimized in this, you know, sexual way, or people who do the victimizing. I mean, it's all, there's just a lot to deal with here. And at the end of the film, you know, as most based on a true story films do, you'll have that little like text at the end, like, and so went on to do this.
Here's the outcome of the trial. Yeah.
Right. Well, this has something a little different, which it says after this story went out in the Boston Globe and it went huge, people started investigating it in their towns. And it lists a ton of towns where the same, although to varying extents, were found. Various cases were found throughout the country, and the list of these cities that were affected by this problem. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 3, you know, title screens long. It's huge. And, I mean, it's a gut punch right at the end because you're like, yay, they succeeded and, you know, Boston is good. And then it's like, but here's all the other cities where this was found in the months and years after this event. And it is just a gut punch because it is huge and it is a huge problem. And, you know, it's very easy to look at it and say, well, the Catholic Church or the church in general or Christians or whatever, you could do it a million different ways. But that's not fair to the people who aren't doing it. That's not fair because by and large, I'm not going to say this isn't a problem because it is a problem, but I'm going to say that by and large, I think it's still a minority in any group. So it's not really fair to assume anything about any group of people. But what I will say is that it is, I mean, it's devastating when you see the amount of cities that have suffered from this same sort of epidemic. And the film touches on this, that there's a clinical, like, psychological diagnosis for priests or pastors or just authority figures who have, you know, this problem, who struggle with this, I don't know, temptation or this, you know, whatever in their mind. It is a problem, and it is something that's real, and it's something that is not just, I guess what I want to say is it's not just exclusive to the Catholic Church. And
right.
While this film focuses on the Catholic Church, it's not a problem exclusive to the Catholic Church. And I don't feel like this film does a good job of explaining necessarily that it's not, but I don't
of course not.
Feel like that was the film's necessarily, like, I don't think that was maybe their job. I don't know.
Yeah, it's when it's about that sort of thing, like, I get it. Like, if it's about this specific context, I don't necessarily think it is their responsibility to remind people, like, now, this was this case, you know.
Right.
I mean, now
because it's focused on 4 protagonists in one area.
In one area,
I mean, that is what they were dealing with.
But maybe what they should have done after all the other parishes they found is just been like, you know, inside or outside the Catholic Church, sexual abuse is a gigantic problem. here's here's a charity you can donate to help combat it, something like that.
Exactly. Something like that would have gone, I feel like, a long way to kind of make it a more level-headed, I almost said documentary. It's not a documentary, it's a narrative. A more level-headed.
Hollywood's not interested in portraying the Catholic Church in a positive light, even though like these people did not deserve to be portrayed in a positive light. It's not worth it to them to set the record straight about other Catholics, because why?
Yeah. Right. This is true. I mean, this goes back to something we talked about several episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood's not interested in portraying Christians or, really anybody who isn't a liberal atheist in any sort of positive light.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those where what I'd really be interested in, Hooper, is to get your perspective on this, because I think it's a movie that's level enough that you could enjoy it as a film.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious to see kind of where you would fall on, whether or not you find it as fair as I find it, if that makes sense.
It sounds pretty. It sounds. I'd have to see it, but I mean, it sounds like they did a pretty good job. I mean. Again,
right,
when the film's
context.
whole premise is about the Catholic Church part, I don't really expect or think that they should have to constantly remind you throughout the story, like, no, this doesn't only happen in the Catholic Church. Like, this happens, in a lot of institutions.
Exactly.
But I just know that the behind the scenes, like, it's sexier to them if they, probably was not the right word to use, but
probably not.
It's
more appealing.
It is, yeah. I'll repeat it now that people know what I'm trying to go for. It's sexier to the people wanting to make the film if it's a revered institution like the Catholic Church, who probably more than anyone or more than most shouldn't be molesting people. Like if there is a scale of people who should be molesting people, the Catholic Church and religious institutions are definitely at the top of people who definitely should not and aren't expected and should know better.
Right.
So it's sexier to them. It just like it's better if it's sexier to people to think that 9/11 is an inside job, because it's like, oh, the people who shouldn't be attacking America, like our government, are the ones who are doing it. So therefore, like, let's just focus on that story instead of, okay, well, there's a whole world out there full of people who hate us and hate our culture and hate everything about us.
Right. Exactly.
It makes me angry because when like in places where like they're getting little boys in trouble for like pulling a girl's ponytail or something, and they're saying like they're calling that rape. It's just like, no, these are real victims of real assault. Like this other little stuff, like it's just you're downplaying the seriousness of. So it's not like we had to remind people that sexual assault is bad, but. And I do think for the most part, Hollywood is in the feel good industry. They're interested in making everyone feel good about themselves, or at least making themselves feel good about themselves by pointing out either an obvious tragedy or travesty like sexual abuse here, or like gay rights, or racism, or some other sort of thing. So I cannot look at movies without that cynical angle anymore, because I can just see their nature, and I feel like that's just how I feel about it. However, a well-executed movie is a well-executed movie is a well-executed movie. So if this was really done as effectively as you're giving me the impression of, then I think it's probably worth seeing.
One of the reasons that I wanted to watch this, because, again, at the film festival, when you've been working all day, I mean, there's definitely a feeling of, like, I want to see it, but I kind of want to leave too. Like, I could go grab dinner right now. But I wanted to watch it because I wanted to see how they portrayed the church in the film, because I'm very interested in just, let's see how negative they make it out. And so, yeah, it was not as bad as I assumed it would be. I think the movie is a very good movie. I think it's effective. I think it'll hit people hard, but I feel like it'll hit people differently. Some people, I think, may be predisposed to I don't want to say like not caring about it, but I think there will be people who are predisposed to not wanting to hear about it, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, that was a dark time for the church, or that was a dark time for us, or whatever. And I don't want to hear about it. And so I think there are people who won't respond well to the film. But I do think it's a good movie. The cast is all, top notch. I mean, with a cast like that, they just have to be. And there's a few parts where I thought the script may have been a little bit lazy in terms of how they got their next lead. But then again, maybe that's the way it was. I don't know enough about the story, but a lead would just be sort of dropped in their lap. And I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of convenient. But that may have been how it was. So, who am I to really say? So long story short, I do recommend the film. And I do recommend seeing it with a large group of people. But I understand also that it's probably not a film that's worth paying $12 for. So if you can see it in a large group of people for $1, then do it. But if not, then, So it's not a great movie. It's not one I'm going to buy on DVD. It's probably not one I'm going to rewatch because it's depressing. But
yeah.
But it is an effective film, and it is a gut punch, and it certainly deals with a tough issue and doesn't back away from the fact that it's tough. So anyway, yeah, that's about all I got to say about Spotlight.
Okay. Well, we pretty much have to wrap up.
Yeah, we do.
I do want to say real quick, in theaters now is the only thing that's really out that I feel like is even... It really catches my attention is I saw a promo for it on TV is the 33, which I believe is about the Chilean miners, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Correct.
This was a big thing when it was happening in 2010. Like everyone was watching because these people were buried, and and I believe they all got out. Like I believe there were no casualties. Like I believe all 33 of these people. I may not know the correct numbers on that. I might have to correct myself on the amount of people who made it. But like this, starring Antonio Banderas, Juliette Binoche, Rodrigo Santoro, like you got a lot of good people involved in this story, and which is I love survival stories. And holy shit, how are we going to get out of here? Or holy shit, we're going to die. No, we're not. Let's get out. I like stories like that. So hopefully this turns out to be a good movie. I like true story. I like things that are based on true stories, especially because the more you can watch a movie like this and tell yourself this really happened and not like, oh, some writer created these circumstances to prove a point kind of a thing. Like I like seeing movies more and more. I'm liking seeing movies based on true events just because even if they do embellish it a little bit, like this happened, and the timing of making a movie about a movie about true events is almost in itself adds to the poignancy of a film. So, so yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. HooperCast on Google. Next week, I don't know, something.
Some stuff. Let me pull up my list really quick, and maybe let me read them out to you, Hoop, and then if you want me to do one of those, we'll go ahead and plug it.
Oh yeah.
So the 20th, a film called Legend opens, which I saw at the festival. So I could talk about that prior to its release.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do Legend next.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead and plug that really quick?
I thought
I can kind of give. Well, let me give it a quick little synopsis of it really quick. Yeah. Legend is a new film coming out which stars Tom Hardy and Emily Browning, and I'll just read the IMDb thing. It says the film tells the story of the identical twin gangsters Reggie and Ronnie Cray, two of the most notorious criminals in British history, and their organized crime empire in the East End of London during the 1960s. And again, this features Tom Hardy playing both roles, Reggie and Ronnie Cray. So, stay tuned for that review.
Also, something I didn't necessarily mean to get to today, but you said November 20th, and it reminded me. We have not talked about Jessica Jones, and we will not in this episode, but I want to get your thoughts on what we know so far and what we've seen, because there's 2 trailers out for that show, and that will be on Netflix on November 20th. All I can say right now is I'm going to be watching it. So maybe next time we can talk a little Jessica Jones, and then maybe a couple episodes after that we can actually talk about the show itself.
Yeah, I've not seen much from that.
Yeah, you ought to watch a couple
like
of
trailer wise. All I've seen is, I think, the first trailer that came out, and then I was like, "That's enough. I'm good. I'll wait and see everything else when it happens." But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, should be good. Yeah.
All right, guys. See you guys later. See you next week. Enjoy the movies. Everybody. Enjoy TV. Goodbye. I was gonna go to school, but then I got high.
We got a little jazzy right there.
Then I got high. What was the I can't remember the lyrics because I got high.
I know, right? That song's so old.
Yeah, it's really old. Yeah. Yeah, I gotta go to work.
Okay.
All right, goodbye.
Goodbye.